We have said this many times, the US will fight to preserve the dollar system. They won't just sit back and watch China or the BRICS challenge their hegemony and do nothing. And true enough, we have breaking news from the Middle East. Welcome to episode 2, guys. America strikes back. And in our lead story today, the Saudis agree with America on a path to normalize ties with Israel. And this could materialize in the next 9 to 12 months. I think we know why America is doing this. They are trying to mimic China's peace plan between Saudi Arabia and Iran. In other words, they are jealous and realize that maybe conflict isn't the way forward and peace is a better incentive for their agenda. And what the US wants is for Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel, and in return, they get US security guarantees and a big prize help to build a civilian nuclear program. And this is the big carrot that's being dangled in front of MBS, and he might just bite. But as we know, nothing in life comes for free. America wants something from Saudi Arabia. In fact, they want three things that are in direct opposition to China and unthinkable to the global south. According to the Wall Street Journal, here are three assurances that Biden would likely push for. Number one, don't let China build military bases in the kingdom. And that is an obvious one. They don't want any challenge to America's CENTCOM or Central Command in the region. Number two, limit the spread of Chinese technology in Saudi Arabia, and that means no Huawei for MBS. Number three, and this is a big one, to only price their oil sales in US dollar. Biden wants MBS not to sell oil and gas for the Chinese yuan. Plain and simple, right? And what we are seeing is America admitting that they face an existential crisis. They know the Middle East is slowly slipping away and the US dollar is their Achilles heel. Now, ever since Biden saw consequences on MBS, America has been on the defensive, right? The Saudis have cut oil production by millions of barrels a day, and they are now working closer with Russia and OPEC+. So this is a big gamble by the United States to retain the dollar's hegemony. Now, if this works, we'll see de-dollarization slow down and America pull out a win against the BRICS. Now, if this fails, then the end of the reserve currency is all but assured, and we can fast forward the timetable. Remember, guys, we live in objective reality here. We must observe where the wind blows. And there's a reason why America wants oil to be priced in dollars. Over the past 50 years since 1971, the dollar has been gaining strength. It is now a gigantic monster that is hard to defeat. And that's a big reason why Western medias like to laugh at the dollarization efforts, right? And that's why we have headline after headline telling us that the dollar will never be dethroned. And it all comes down to the increasing demand for US dollars. Now, we know the basics by now. If you want to import commodities and food, you need dollars to do so. And if you want to invest your dollar cash, your dollar assets, only one market is big enough to absorb all that liquidity. And that is the infamous US Treasury market. The US Treasury market is over $25 trillion strong. It is bigger than the entire G7 combined plus China. And the demand for US dollar means money will keep flowing to treasuries. That is keeping the system afloat. And we need to look at things objectively here, guys. There's only so much money that can flow into gold. The Chinese yuan isn't a comfortable currency yet and won't happen anytime soon. And other bond markets are either too small or their currencies are too unstable versus the dollar. And this is why it is futile to try and challenge the dollar in the debt markets. As we have said before, the only weak spot, the weak link in the chain comes in the commodity markets, tangible goods. And that's why all those bilateral trade deals, the yuan, rubles or rupees for oil, that is the wooden stake to the vampire, the silver bullet the werewolf is truly afraid of. America can't afford to let Saudi Arabia trade their oil for other currencies, especially the yuan. So they won't sit back, twiddle their thumbs and let it happen because it will start a chain reaction. Just imagine if Saudi Arabia joins BRICS. We already know that the BRICS have surpassed the G7 in certain measures of GDP. In fact, the crossover has already happened back in 2020. If the Saudis start pricing their oil for yuan, if they join the BRICS, they can replicate this with the rest of the global south. And that is a real nightmare that Washington doesn't want to deal with. The dollarization doesn't mean the yuan has to replace the dollar, right? If the Saudis accept Indian rupees or even the Saudi rial for oil, it is also considered de-dollarization. Now, back in Davos, during the gathering of the elite, their finance minister explicitly said they are open to non-dollar trade. And I'm very sure that Washington understood the subtext. They know it as a veiled threat and the empire is striking back. So why is the dollar so important to America? There are a ton of reasons, but let's just focus on the two big ones. Now, the first is the ability to borrow money. And this is the easiest to understand, and I think it's the most important reason today. In our previous video, we talked about why the US economy is still afloat even though the rest of the world is starting to crash and burn. We have Germany in a recession, then we have China hitting deflation, global demand is drying up. But speaking of Chinese deflation, I mean, having breakfast for 40 cents looks really awesome to me. Wish I could get that deal. Now, after years of inflation, I could use some deflation in my life. But back to America, the dollar system allows them to keep borrowing money from the world to pump back into the US economy. It is the ultimate superpower, draining capital from the world because they need dollars to keep the zombie system alive. Just look at US GDP in Q1 and Q2 this year. Both are well above 2%. What kind of black magic is this? What kind of dark arts is being conjured here to keep the economy going while the rest of the world is starting to shrink? The answer is deficit spending, guys. Remember the debt ceiling suspension back in June? Janet Yellen borrowed over $1 trillion within a month to give Congress money to spend. And that is an awesome deal. That is the power of having the reserve currency. And this is one lever of control they don't want to give up. If I had an unlimited platinum credit card with the ability to print my own money, I'd keep borrowing forever as well. And the second is to retain military hegemony. Now, war is expensive, we all know that. And America has a ton of bases overseas. And I think this next chart will shock you. America has 750 bases in at least 80 countries. They are all over the world, like a McDonald's franchise. And when you have such a big commitment, you need cash. You need the ability to borrow money to pay your troops, equip them with weapons, and to project power out to the world. And every time we buy US treasuries, we are actually subsidizing their military as well. And this is one advantage that they don't want to lose, because if the dollar system breaks down and they can't borrow, the Federal Reserve will have to print money and it will snowball towards hyperinflation. So it's really no surprise why America is pushing back against China, the BRICS, and de-dollarization. They still have a ton of tricks left in their bag. Now, will this work? Truth be told, we have no idea. I'm not clairvoyant and anything can happen. The BRICS could win, or America could pull ahead in the short term. But Saudi Arabia now faces a very tough choice. I can just imagine the stress MBS has when it comes to selecting China or America. Do you choose between the reigning hegemon of the world or the ascending power? Because either way, you're going to piss off one side. Now, if the Saudis go with America, they would in fact get a nuclear program which could turn them into a regional power in the Middle East. But that could come at the cost of working with China. And check out this headline from Bloomberg. The US push for Saudi-Israel deal is all about China, which is exactly what it is. If we throw the cards on the table, we can see that China is Saudi Arabia's lifeline when it comes to oil sales. Because we are going through a recession, global demand will drop and it's Chinese demand that is keeping revenue strong. And check this out, China is going to buy 40% more crude from the kingdom because a mega refiner is taking more oil under a new agreement. And this is a big deal because both countries are supporting each other. China is pumping money to Saudi Arabia in exchange for energy security. And remember that the West is going to go full Greta Thunberg sooner or later. They will go green and their fossil fuel consumption will come down sooner or later. And this is why I'm a little skeptical if the Saudis will jump on board Biden's plan to protect the dollar and to contain China, because that's essentially what it is. Now, I have no idea which side Saudi Arabia will choose at the end of the day. It's obvious they are leaning closer towards China. However, they also want a nuclear program. It is part of MBS 2030 plan to move away from hydrocarbons, and that could be big enough incentive to lure them away from BRICS. And that's why everything is still a big coin toss and the coin is still spinning. But let's analyze the winners and the losers here. Saudi Arabia is the kingmaker, guys, and whoever they choose to side with will either retain hegemony or guard against it. And let's say America wins. The Saudis get on board with Washington and they agree to their terms. They only price oil in dollars and no other currencies. They stop working with Huawei and they don't allow China to build military bases in the country. Now, if that happens, it will be a setback for China and the BRICS bloc. And we'll see the dollar remain on top for longer and it will be harder to topple the dollar system. There will be an absolute control and everything will be status quo for quite some time, right? So if the Saudis keep pricing their oil in dollars, this will keep confidence up and the need for the reserve currency high. And this allows America to do two things to stay on top. The first is obvious, they can keep issuing a ton of bonds for endless deficit spending. So essentially the world will keep subsidizing the US economy. and this allows America to stay ahead of emerging markets. They also can keep the money printing game up because treasuries is the biggest bond market around, plus oil is still priced in dollars. Central banks will continue to hold the majority of their reserves in dollars, and the decline of the dollar reserves we see here will just slow down. And this is scary because now the Federal Reserve can always print trillions of dollars to save the US economy, and inflation will get spread around the world. So there won't be much risk of hyperinflation because dollar holders are still global. So you can kind of see how big of a deal Saudi Arabia is. Their decision can cause a ripple effect that will accelerate de-dollarization or slow it down. Now, of course, if Saudi Arabia says no to America and moves closer towards China, then the end of the dollars hegemony will speed up dramatically. And that's why we are seeing this epic struggle in the Middle East. In a way, America has telegraphed their fear of the petrodollar system breaking. That's why this Saudi-Israel normalization suddenly came about. It is not a coincidence. So let's wrap this up nicely, because as investors, we need to see where the wind is blowing and consider the fact that either China or America could win this Game of Thrones. America's not going to sit back and relax, guys. They won't just let their hegemony get taken away without a fight. And we can see this from Biden's own comments against China, calling their economic problems a ticking time bomb. And here's what he said: China was growing at 8% a year to maintain growth and now close to 2% a year. That's not good, because when bad folks have problems, they do bad things. So we can see that this economic war is about to get dirtier, it's about to get grittier. America is losing ground, so they're striking back in a very desperate way. But here's the dark reality: even if Saudi Arabia stays with the dollar system, for people like you and me, the common man, it's not going to be a win. America will keep borrowing money and keep deficit spending high. And this means inflation will always be a problem. And we'll see even bigger boom and bust cycles going forward, right? And that's why I personally hold assets like gold, because it is neutral. And whether America or China wins, gold will win as well. Now, if China wins and they de-dollarize the world, more money will flow into precious metals. And if America manages to protect the dollar system, we'll be stuck in perpetual inflation, and all assets will keep rising, and that will include gold as well. But we've got to get ready for more breaking news and shocking moves from both sides, because this battle is far from over. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Who will Saudi Arabia choose? Will it be America or China? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.